and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today is Father Mike Racine. He is the pastor of the Whaling City Catholic Community, the churches of St. Francis, St. Lawrence, Holy Family, Holy Name.
Holy Name.
Holy Name.
Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart, yeah, well, it's a long name.
It's a long name.
Thanks for coming in.
You're very welcome.
Good to see you, as always to see you. You and I were chatting after Mass, actually, and I asked you to, it's been quite a week, quite a month, I should say, for the Catholic Church, in an amazing time. You had Easter, the passing of Pope Francis, a period of mourning, and the conclave, and now Pope Leo, and it's been a whirlwind, really, when you think about the Church. You know, the one thing that I was amazed at, I was talking to you Sunday after that, it's amazing that, to me, that event, it seems to get a response from everyone, no matter what the denomination is. Everybody seems to pay attention to to Pope Francis, the passing, and then everybody's interested in who's going to be the next Pope.
Sure, yeah. You got to remember, Pope is a head of state, and when something happens, you get those reactions, obviously, from the world leaders, which most did send some sort of condolence or message, and then the people react, not only as Catholics, but as Protestants and worldwide, because he is a figurehead. He is one who has been certainly present in the Church, and it does send a powerful message that we can come together in these times.
And there were, I don't even know what newscast it was, but Jewish faith were in the St. Peter's Square,
Sure. Yeah.
which you think about, it's like, well, it doesn't impact their religion, but they're interested, they're vested,
Yes.
and that's what amazed me. Is it is again, it didn't matter the denomination.
No.
The passing of the Pope Francis affected worldwide mourning, and then the new Pope, the election of the new Pope. And it's crazy.
Yeah, EWTN had extensive coverage of the passing of Pope Francis, the funeral, the conclave, and they were constantly interviewing people, and the reporters were coming across people who were of different faiths and asking them, what brought you here? And it was just the presence of who Pope Francis was as a figure of the Church, and the curiosity, obviously, of the conclave. And it does attract a lot of non-Catholics to these events, because we can come together.
That figurehead, I mean, there hasn't been, I don't have the exact number, I think it's like 240. There's only been like 240 popes.
267? 67. 267.
And when you think about that through time, there's not a lot of people that have held that position.
No.
And, for a lot of people, that position is, there's a lot of time with that person, whoever that is Pope.
Yeah. Except for Pope John Paul I.
Correct.
Which was a
33 days.
33 days. Yeah, it does happen on occasion where something does happen, but for the most part, the reigns of the papacy are extensive, because it's a lifetime role at once elected, unless you take like something with Pope Benedict, who on his own decided to resign, but for the most part it's a lifetime.
And I would imagine you saw that, whether it was daily Mass or Sunday Masses or the weekend Masses, I should say. I mean, you hear the parishioners talking about that.
Sure, yeah. The morning of Pope Francis's death came, obviously, I think, as a shock a little bit, because we were not prepared, because he had been present on Easter Sunday.
It was I didn't even believe that.
And I found out at about 5:15 in the morning. I just saw it on Facebook, and I'm scrolling through it. This is reality. Something has happened, and I scrambled, because a few months prior to this, I did purchase some nice pictures of the Holy Father preparing for this day, and then the customary of draping the front of the church is in the black. But when people came into the church that morning, some knew and some were like, oh, we didn't know. So it drew attention to the parishioners, and throughout the next few weeks of offering the daily masses for the Pope prior to the funeral, the period of mourning, and then offering masses of the Holy Spirit for the conclave. So it was an extensive, few weeks there. But it did send a message to the people that this is what we do when these times arise.
Well, that's where the tradition comes in with the
Tradition
church.
is very important in the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it was really the first time as a pastor of a parish that we did this with a reigning Pope, because Pope Benedict was not Pope when he passed away. We did the customary thing, but it was a little different this time.
Well, as I told you, you couldn't have scripted it, and I don't mean to sound.
Sure.
His passing, you couldn't have scripted any better,
have been better.
as you if you were Pope.
Yeah.
He on Easter Sunday he was out with the flock, and he loved to do that.
Yeah.
There's no question. He loved to be with the people.
Absolutely.
And it was beautiful, really, if you want to put it that way. It was unbelievable.
Very powerful. When I saw it after the busyness of Easter Sunday, watching the evening news, watching it on
He looked
TV,
good, too.
He looked good, but you could see he was very, very bloated. And they say that he asked prior to going out to the balcony of giving the blessing, do you think I should go in take the customary ride in the Pope Mobile? And they advised him to do it, and he was grateful for that.
And that's what it was. I mean, when you saw the news clips and the sound bites, I mean, he looked good. I mean, he was weak and raspy.
Yeah.
But that's what made Monday, to me at least, shocking, because he had been so sick for so long, and then you see that, and it was just...
Yeah, I was quite taken back when I got up Monday morning.
And you see him with smiling, and it just... It was shocking, really.
You couldn't have scripted it better.
No. What? First of all, when you look back at popes, and I know obviously you've studied them and what have you, but even in your lifetime, what makes a good pope? What makes someone who affects people in a way that they remember them, they love them, really?
I think every pope in my lifetime, going back to the late years of Pope Paul VI as a kid, and then going into Pope John Paul I, which we all knew as the smiling Pope,
right?
Which only lasted for 33 days of his papacy. And then you take somebody like Pope John Paul II, who, number one, made history by not being the first non-Italian Pope in centuries, coming from Poland. And of course, having a Polish community here in New Bedford, that was a great celebration for them. And I was only a kid at the time. I was a young adult at the time. I wasn't even in the seminary, but the interest started sparking.
Yeah.
Because immediately we had Pope John Paul II as the traveling Pope. And one of his visits obviously was to Boston.
Yep.
In the late 70s.
I remember that visit.
And it was a very rainy day.
Poured like the Dickens.
But he charmed the people with his love. And because I remember the comment he made as the water was dripping through the makeshift altar balcony, "Pope loves you, even in the rain." Those are things you remember. But it's their personalities.
Yeah.
And in their gifts. Pope John Paul II had the gift of the youth. He started these World Youth Days.
He was only 59 when he became Pope.
59.
Yeah.
I went to the very first Youth Day.
Did you?
In Denver, Colorado, as a seminarian. And when Father Dave Coster of Diocese, he was in charge of the youth ministry, put the whole trip together. And he said, would you like to come around as a chaperone? And we were conversing before we went on the air, sleeping on the floor and, watching the kids. That's what we did for 8 nights. And that was a great experience to see, and I actually met him for like 5 minutes unexpectedly because we had an off day of things, and he was coming back to where he was staying, and there was a group of us just walking around, and we kind of sensed something was going on. We saw the white, coverings on the wreck. And sure enough, he was coming down the road, and the security guys were very nice. They saw our IDs, and they let us come over and just say hello. And of course, we didn't have cell phones back then,
No,
and things like
no
that.
pictures.
We don't have no pictures, but great memories. And then you take after 20 plus years of that reign of Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict, who was a little bit more, I use it wisely, the word of conservatism, but still had that sense of presence to the people, and continued the traditions of Pope John Paul II, and leading into the reign of Pope Francis.
What was Pope Francis? Because he seemed to, he was a worldly, I guess, presence, coming from South America, and what do you think is his legacy? What do you think? I read that he wasn't expecting to be Pope long, because he started at, I think, 78.
He was early 70s.
Was it? Because I think he was only expecting it to do it for a couple of
71,
years.
70, probably about 72, 73.
And then, he lived longer than he thought he was.
13 years.
Yeah. But I'm curious, so what do you think his legacy is? What
Simplicity.
people gravitated toward him?
Simplicity. He was a very simple man. And he started right from the start of not living in the papal apartments, living in the very simple rooms provided, wearing the black shoes, not the traditional papal shoes. Just, I think, simplicity and love to the poor. As you know, every Holy Thursday, he went the custom of celebrating Holy Thursday Mass in the Basilica, and he went to a prison, and he washed the feet of the prisoners. He embraced them. That was his role. I think it would be his legacy will be simplicity,
inclusiveness too.
Inclusiveness. Exactly.
The way I look at it too, from just, he tried to invite everyone into the church.
He did. And there were those who criticized it, but it didn't bother him. He wanted to show the role of Jesus. We all know that old slogan, what would Jesus do? And he did that. He welcomed everybody.
It's interesting too, because I don't think people think of politics when it comes to religion, but there is politics within the church.
Yeah.
There are those more conservative or traditionalists, and those that would like to see the church be more inclusive, I guess, is the way to do that. Talk a little bit about that, because I don't think people grasp that.
It is true, because every pope has their own style, but within the church itself, inclusiveness is very important, because you have to reach out to everybody, and to see who, to welcome those, who want to be embraced by the church. You never know who you're going to welcome back by this, and I think if you're that, sometimes the rigidness might scare them away a little bit, and I don't think we do it in a way that we want to do that, but people just take that as, do I really, is this for me? But when they see the embracing of the leaders of the church, and it doesn't have to be the Pope, it can be priest, it can be bishop, it can be everybody.
I joke with you, Sundays, and when I come in, I'm like, I hope for a good show today. But at the same time, it's kind of true that you're performing.
Exactly.
Yeah. A bishop is performing, a cardinal. You're performing for a group of people.
Exactly. And we all have our own styles, but the most important thing is to get the message out and how people take that message. And I think just by the simpleness of doing it. And that's what Pope Francis did. He went off the cuff and he went off the script a lot when he would be speaking, because something would come to his mind and you could see it. He'd say, put the script down and just talk.
So, I guess from the church standpoint, what did he do that changed? That I don't want to say, because I don't know what the right terms are, but what did he do with the church to change, if anything? And I don't know. I
don't think he changed anything. I think he just gave it a sense of view that the church is welcoming, that the church is present to everyone. And you would see that in his actions when he would be out in the audience at the Wednesday gatherings. He would always, if he was riding in the pulpit, if he saw a little baby, he grabbed it and embraced it. But he also reached out to those who were going through difficult times. There are countless stories of people who had lost loved ones, and somehow word got to him, and he searched them out in that audience. He just reached out to everyone. Nobody was excluded, and that's what the message that he sent for 13 years.
The conclave came, and it was interesting. The cardinals that participated had to be younger than 80. Yeah. And it was interesting. I read that it was the first time that they could remember that Boston, the person who represented the Diocese of Boston, did not participate. Which I thought was just a little sidebar. That I thought that was interesting. But there was a lot of talk going in when you read the stuff about who the favorite is, or who the the traditionalists or the conservatives, and the people who wanted to follow Pope Francis. And
there was very little. There was some talk about Cardinal Prevost, but not as much as the high-ranking ones. The Secretary of State, the Cardinal from the Philippines, Diego, was very well leading candidate. But that's why they took those few days, because don't forget, Pope Francis created a majority of these cardinals.
Correct. The majority of the cardinals were him.
And they really needed to get to know each other in these days leading from the funeral to the conclave. And I think they did a good job. They did.
We don't know what goes on inside there. I mean, from your perspective, what are they looking for? Because you've got two different factions, or actually probably more than that, different factions that are looking. What are they looking for? Because Pope Francis wasn't, before, when he was cardinal, he wasn't one of the favorites to get the position either.
No.
And Pope John Paul.
Yeah.
Again, so
tradition was an Italian, and we haven't had an Italian.
So it's like, I'm curious and again, we're not in there, but I'm
right. I think they're just looking for when the conclave comes, they look back at who was he succeeding, what was his style, but what were his main focuses of his papacy, and what will be continued. Because don't forget, in the later years of Pope Francis, there was a lot of issues that were being discussed that one side of the cardinals were not totally, against. Is he, and then, what will the next pope do with a lot of those? And that it's the old saying, the Holy Spirit needs to work here. And I think it did. I know it did, personally. They go into the conclave with no ballots with names on them.
Right.
They in their hearts, I think, just begin to pray and look, who will be this man's successor? What will he carry on? What will be the gifts that he can continue in the papacy?
Do you think the church, the only word I can think of is shifting. Do you think is that the right word to say, shifting a little bit from conservative to?
I don't think it's shifting from one thing to the other. I think there's going to be a balance in this papacy. I think there's going to be a balance. And I think that's what a lot of the cardinals were looking at. What, we don't want to go too far to the right. We don't want to go too far to the left. But they also look, because don't forget, Cardinal Prevost was in charge of what they call the dicastery of the bishops, choosing bishops for diocese. So he, they knew what he was doing in placing bishops in diocese, and that's going to be one of his big roles as Pope. And they look at that, look at the decisions that he made, and who he's placed where.
Okay.
And again, I don't think there's a shift. I think there needs to be a balance.
From your standpoint, I mean, there is a hierarchy to the church.
Yeah.
And as you said, everybody has their own style, everybody's different. How does the papacy, how does that person at the top affect, for example, what you do or how you do things? And I'm not just talking you specifically, I'm talking any pastor.
I don't think, obviously we don't have the closeness to him, but I think what we see is how he wants to bring the church together as a universal church. And that goes down now to the bishops leading their priest into following his direction. Because, and I say this with all great respect, in the reign of Pope Benedict, there was a sense of conservatism among the clergy, because this is what they were seeing from not everybody, but a majority, particularly the younger clergy.
Yes, I've read
great
that. Yeah.
Following of Pope Benedict in their ways and in their styles. Doesn't make them a bad person, but now 13 years of Pope Francis, not as the conservative, but as the one who's following what Jesus would want to teach us in the liturgy, by celebrating very pastorally, without the fancy vestments, without the fancy mitres and the pallium. Very simple. So there was, I think it follows in every papacy. What direction is he going to lead the church? How will that affect the clergy? That is going to come down to a majority of the bishops as well, leading their clergy and teaching their clergy, okay, we need to do a little bit more of this. Either way.
Right. Talk a little bit about Pope Leo. Your initial impressions.
My initial impressions were
first an American. Exactly.
I was in the rectory at the time. It was one of those crazy days, and I had when I got up that morning, they had already taken 2 votes because there's a 6-hour difference.
Right. Yep.
So at our 6 o'clock our time, I threw on the TV, and by chance the black smoke come. Okay, there's nothing this morning, so we knew there wasn't going to be anything until that day, later on that day, and wow! By shortly after noontime, with that third, fourth vote, I was actually over at St. Lawrence doing something, and I got a text. We got a pope. So it was, and then so I went back and I just watched. But I was also connecting with the kids in one of the classes at the school, because we spent a lot of time teaching with the kids.
That doesn't happen when you're in school.
Exactly, and for most of these kids in the middle school, it's their first time of seeing this. So we did a lot with Pope Francis, the funeral, and then the conclave. And I connected immediately with the 7th grade teacher. It was easy to just do it by phone, to run down there. And we were prepared, we were watching the coming out of Pope Leo. And the reaction of the kids, obviously, it was like, wow, we got an American. Yeah, that's our American. Now, there's a quick little story here. Catholic TV, I was watching it, and Bishop Reed, and they focused the camera in St. Peter's Square, and who's standing right in the front row? With Cardinal Sean O'Malley. Mm-hmm. And the words were, well, we know it's not him. Yeah. Yeah. But my reaction of Leo right now, I'm very positive, very pastoral, Obviously, he speaks great English. This morning, just at his Wednesday audience, he gave his first Wednesday audience in catechesis, and he did it in several languages, including English. And the Americans, you could hear in the St. Peter's Square, the cheers for their American Pope. I'm very happy with the selection. I think he's going to be a good leader. There's a lot of good advantages. Number one, he's only 69 years old.
Yep.
Please God, we have him for many, many years, and God grant him that health.
He seems like a simple man,
Very
too.
simple. Very simple.
I mean, it's funny, when they were talking to people in Chicago, where his family and from and everything, they still were calling him Father Bob.
Yeah, you see the family home. It's like a little, you know.
But I just laughed. It's Father Bob.
Father Bob. Yeah.
But I kind of chuckle. He's now
The Pope.
He's now the Pope, but to them, it's Father Bob.
And to his brothers, that's my brother.
Yeah, but that's what the dichotomy was amazing. It's just like, it's Father Bob. He's Pope now.
Yep. But my first impressions, and everybody seems very happy with the selection. Obviously, the American Cardinals were very, very happy. They had a long 3.5 weeks, being away from home.
I mean, he's calling for, I know, right off the bat, I mean, he's offered the Vatican as a place to hold peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. I mean,
which would be wonderful.
Calling for peace in the Middle East. I mean, he's already taking issues and sort of giving we need to come together and stop.
We need to come together. And I think this is going to have a great advantage, keeping America at its toes as well, reminding us that, hopefully bringing back values and tradition, working with the present administration in the country. Vice President Vance was at the Mass on Sunday, representing the country, which was very nice.
Does the Pope, we got about a minute and a half, but I'm curious.
Oh, this went by fast.
I know. How much sway does a Pope have when it comes to like those geopolitical things? He is such a world figure.
It's depending on which country we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think with America, I think he's going to have a lot of influence. And please God, with Ukraine and Russia. Those are the top priorities right now.
Are there any big things that he needs to tackle, do you think? Any issues that are at the forefront, at least in your mind, that as Pope that's going to be addressed quickly?
I think he needs to encourage vocations
to
the priesthood, particularly in America, because the numbers are a little down.
Yeah.
And I think this might have a nice influence on vocations.
Yeah.
That's our prayer. Yeah.
Well, it's great seeing you.
Always a pleasure.
Good stuff today. You're right, it has gone pretty quick, but it's just an amazing time. It's been an amazing time, and I mean, I didn't even think of the kids, but you're right. It could be only once it happens when you're in school.
Right. Yeah. And for some of these cardinals, it was probably their last conclave.
Right.
Yeah. And some of them, for many, will have many, many more. The youngest cardinal was 45 years old in that conclave.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I noticed a lot of them were only, like you said, under Pope Francis, and they were, became cardinals in 2022, 2023, so they're 10 years not long either.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Anyway, great seeing you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Jim.
That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.